Today I'm going to show you how I decorated this graduation cake. Come join me. So the first thing I did was made in advance the cap that was going to go on top. So I made some Rice Krispie treats and then I really just kind of sanded this down so that it was nice and smooth, so that when I covered it with fondant, it would not be felt through the fondant. So I just used this, it's essentially like a cheese grater, and I just used that and ran that across the entire surface of this Rice Krispie treat that I made. And ultimately just did this over the top. The bottom not so much, because that will be against the cake, and so you won't be able to feel that once it's covered with fondant and sitting on top of the cake. So the next thing I did was work with some white fondant, and I am coloring it pink. That's the color requested by the customer. Used some pink food dye and just really mixed it well into my white fondant. So after it was mixed into the fondant, I then rolled this out. I added some Tylose powder, which you'll see here right now, and that will really help it to dry extra hard so that it sits firm on the cake, and it doesn't like become flimsy. So then I rolled this out, and I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to drape it over top of that piece of Rice Krispie treat, and I'm going to cover that cap, the bottom part of the cap. So I'm going to cut off any of the excess pieces of fondant that are around the outside, and then I'm going to wrap the excess underneath the bottom. And once I have a lot of that actually wrapped underneath the bottom, I'm going to set that aside. Just kind of push those edges down, then set it aside. And I'm going to roll out this piece again, cut out a circle, and put that on the bottom of that cap so that it secures those pieces that are loose underneath together. So this square piece is the top part of the mortar board of the cap that I had made previously, along with pieces that I had used an extruder for making the tassel. So here I am just kind of adhering those pieces together to make the actual tassel. You can see me kind of pulling together those individual pieces, and I'm really just, creating a tassel for the top of this cap. So I'm bringing together those individual strings. Here I am creating a piece that it's typically that silver piece that goes around the tassel. So I will wrap that around. I do paint that silver. I put a toothpick here on the top. I'm going to use that to help hold that in place. The mortar board on top of the cap, and also that tiny little button that goes on top, so you can see that I'm adhering that to the top as well. You can see that the cap is starting to come together. Here is that little silver piece. I'm going to paint that silver so it looks like an actual tassel. I'm going to paint that silver, and I'm using some silver luster dust along with some alcohol to some vodka to paint that silver. Then I'm going to attach that to the top around that button and secure it onto the top and let that dry for several days prior to decorating the cake. Now here I am actually decorating the cake. It's two 9x13 cakes, and then I'm just going to begin to cover this cake with some vanilla buttercream. So first I'm starting with going around the edge, putting a little bit of extra at the base so that if the cake is a little bit beveled, it will kind of level it out a bit by putting a little bit of extra icing around the very bottom at the cake board. And now I'm going to do the sides and the top and just get this cake covered. So I'll do an initial coat, and then I'll go over it again and do the actual coat that will be the clean white surface that I will use to decorate the cake. Notice I'm paying some special attention to that center line that joins those two 9x13 quarter sheets to create a larger half sheet cake, which is what was ordered by the customer. Once I have that very general first coat on, I'm going back on and putting that second coat on to get really just a good coating of icing onto the cake. Putting some extra icing on the edges to make sure that that is extra coated. And I'm going to work to really square up those edges so that they're nice and crisp, and that's what I'm doing right here. And with all of that done, it's about time to begin decorating. So I'm using pink buttercream to do a border around the bottom. I'll also do a pink border along the top. After finishing that, I'm using another different piping tip and doing a white border over top of that pink border. And then I'll begin to decorate the top of this cake. So here I am first writing the year 2025. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to put that completed cap onto the top, and I'm going to write congratulations. Well, she did it. Congratulations. And I'm using some different piping tips here, some different colors. Here I'm going back and I'm using a different color to do a third border around the bottom. They were kind of looking at a vintage design. They showed me an inspiration piece with a round vintage cake, and so, but they did say they wanted a half sheet cake, so I wanted to try to incorporate some elements of like a vintage cake. And so, you know, really with all those extra layers of icing that are so typical of a vintage cake, and that's why I did so many borders along that bottom. So here I am writing congratulations and then the graduate's name. And then I'm going back and here I am making some different flowers, doing some roses and some daisies in pink. And after I'm done creating each one, I'm putting them into the freezer so that they're nice and hard and I can handle them and place them onto the cake where I want them to be. After I have the ones created that I'm going to be using, I'm going to take them out of the freezer and I'm going to begin placing them onto the cake in different locations around the corners and around the cap. And you can see that I'm able to pick them up and just handle them because they had been frozen. After getting those flowers in place, I'm going to go back and I'm going to use some green icing and I'm going to put some leaves on to the cake. And then after that, the last thing I wanted to do was to add some dimension to the name to make it stand out just a little bit different than the rest of the writing. And I'm going to use a round tip with that lighter pink, and I'm just going to kind of go over it again with that pink color. And with that, that's what this cake looked like. If you enjoyed watching this, I do encourage you to like, comment, and share this video. I also would love if you would subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any future content as it's posted. Last thing I'd like to say is congratulations to Emma, class of 2025. Thank you for joining me, and please come back for future content. Thank you so much.